A sudden alarm on the English Channel
Mayday, mayday! This is the MSC Napoli.
leaves 26 men in desperate need of a daring rescue.
Let's go!
If you lose the engine room on a ship, you've lost the ship.
Abandoned ship!
In my head, I started freaking out, and I started to think, I'm not sure anybody can save us.
The waves and the upwelling was massive, and the wind was horrific. I might never make that life raft.
Why did a state-of-the-art ship split apart?
It's a very rare occurrence. Never really seen an incident like it.
And can an answer be found
There's not much margin for error here.
before disaster strikes again? It's a stormy winter day on the English Channel.
Good afternoon.
The container ship MSC Napoli is sailing west, loaded with more than 2,300 shipping containers, filled with everything from camcorders to dinnerware to auto parts.
Status report, please.
Valentin Vilev is in command.
Maintaining course and speed, Captain. And I've got the latest Met report.
A veteran mariner, he served as master on the massive cargo ship for 5 years.
They're very large ships. Walk one end to the other on the Napoli would take probably 10 minutes.
Today, the captain's facing a challenge. The ship is in gale force winds and heavy seas.
Welcome to January in the North Atlantic, eh, cadets?
Happy to be here in any weather, sir.
Forbes Duthie is on board as a deck cadet, trying to learn the complex operation of these ships.
Here, let me show you.
You just tend to fit into the routine of the people who are already on board, the main ship's crew. They're the ones to lead you and train you. So you really pay attention to what they're doing.
The Napoli is on its way from Antwerp, Belgium, to the port of Sines in Portugal.
Come to port, please. To 220 degrees.
Coming to port, 220 degrees.
But Captain Vilev is running behind. It could be hard to make up the time. At 275 meters, the ship is the length of 2.5 football fields. But despite its size, plowing through 9-meter waves at high speed could damage the ship and its cargo containers. Ken Potter is a marine safety consultant with decades of experience at sea. He knows what the captain was facing.
When the wind comes around to the side of a container ship, they tend to roll. And a lot of the weight of those containers is up high, so they tend to roll more and deeper.
The captain needs to slow down to keep the ship and its cargo safe.
Chief.
Engine room.
This is the captain. Reduce engine speed now to 71 RPM.
Got it, Captain.
As Duthie's shift ends, the pitch and roll of the ship is increasing. He'll have to rest amid the rough motion that mariners learn to endure at sea.
You could tell there was a bit of weather outside, but she was rolling relatively easily, so we had a great sleep.
By the next morning, the ship's motion is getting more violent.
When you're going into a head sea, you're pounding or slamming. It's like a hammer coming down, slamming into the sea.
Around 10 o'clock in the morning, I remember hearing a large bang.
Damn it! We've got flooding in the engine room. Get down there and take a look at what's going on.
A pipe from one of the seawater pumps has torn open. It's a dangerous problem. If the flooding continues, the engine could shut down, leaving the Napoli helpless.
If that happens when you're in heavy weather conditions, you don't have control of your ship anymore. And the ship could broach, which means turn sideways and start to capsize.
In his cabin, all Duthie knows is that the ship is still enduring the storm.
It was at that time of morning that I really had to start getting myself ready for going up to the bridge and attending my watch. And when I was in the shower, dynamic motion of the vessel, it just seemed like out of control. I was being thrown around. Alarm bells started to go off in my head. A huge ship like this shouldn't be moving in this way.
In the engine room, the third engineer works desperately to close the cutoff valve. But it doesn't fix the problem. The engine room is filling with water.
You know, his immediate reaction is going to be, how could this possibly happen?
Bridge.
Captain.
We're in serious trouble down here. The engine room is flooding. We have to shut down the engines.
Understood.
If you lose the engine room on a ship, you've lost the ship.
It's every captain's worst nightmare. Graydon Halge is a former container ship captain. He knows the gravity of this situation.
If you don't have power, then you're at the mercy of the sea. The last thing you want in bad weather.
In the space of a few minutes, the ship's motion almost became like it was out of control. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get myself into my work clothing and go up to the bridge.
The hallway is littered with bags from the crew's immersion suits. Suits they wear if they have to abandon ship. And they're empty.
I was shocked by what appeared in front of me. The whole alleyway was just strewn with these immersion suit bags, which is not a normal sight, I think, on any ship in the world.
Go to the provisions locker, grab as much bottled water as you can.
I knew as soon as I looked at those guys, this is not a normal drill. You don't put on your immersion suit for a normal drill.
The cadets. Oh my God. Go get the other cadet. Go! Go!
The chief officer at the time looked at me with these huge eyes and he was like, the cadets. Oh my God. Go and get your friend. Go and get your friend.
Duthie hurries to help make sure everyone is accounted for.
Nick!
I reached Nick's cabin and I started banging on the door.
Nick! You've got to wake up! Get your suits on, we gotta go to the bridge. What's the matter? Hell if I know, let's go now!
The Napoli is crippled and taking on water 80 kilometers from the nearest land. Out of options, the captain puts out a final distress call.
Mayday, mayday! This is the MSC Napoli. We are making our way to the lifeboats.
I was like, this can't be real. This is crazy. This ship is huge. How could this happen?
The crew of the MSC Napoli is trapped in a deadly emergency. Outside the bridge, the chief engineer shows Deck Cadet Forbes Duthie the cause: a massive vertical crack in the ship's hull.
You could see there was a huge hole there. And in my head, I started freaking out. All sorts of emotions started going through my mind.
When a ship breaks in two, one or both sections capsize. So before the ship actually separated into two pieces, the captain had to get his crew off.
Abandon ship!
As soon as the captain said, abandon ship, it was like a train. Everyone just started going towards the lifeboat station.
Abandoning a ship is never easy. And in the conditions they were in, it was even more challenging.
I just couldn't believe it. This was going to happen.
All 26 Napoli crew members are crammed into a capsule-like lifeboat. It will keep them alive in the violent seas, but it's going to be a rough ride. Adrift on the threshold of the North Atlantic, the nearest help is nearly 100 kilometers away at the Royal Navy Air Station Culdrose in southern England. Royal Navy rescue diver Jay O'Donnell was there that day.
I was the only diver on the squadron for that day, and we're a bit concerned because there's something bubbling up on the radio. And then the alarm went. Get airborne. There's 26 people in the water.
O'Donnell knows the stormy weather is going to make this a tough rescue.
And he could not believe the weather. He could look out the window and it was getting worse and worse. I've never seen the sea so angry in my life.
This is Captain Valev of the MSC Napoli. We've abandoned ship, and we are in a lifeboat in the channel. Do you copy?
You felt like you were inside a washing machine. I mean, you were being thrown about. Because it's so well sealed inside as well, the temperature, it rises quite quickly. You felt like you were in a sauna, if not worse.
To be in a lifeboat with that many other people in confined conditions, it's probably the most horrendous experience you're going to have. It's almost guaranteed that every person on the lifeboat will be seasick.
This is Captain Valev of the MSC Napoli. Do you copy?
There's a portable VHF radio, and we tried using that to contact, but for some reason that just didn't work. And I started to think, I'm not sure anybody can save us. But then you could hear something that seemed really far away, but it sounded like it was a helicopter.
Royal Navy Search and Rescue have spotted the lifeboat, but Jay O'Donnell knows finding it is only the first step.
The waves and the upwelling was massive, and the wind was horrific. It was 70 knots steady. And I just thought I might never make that life raft. It was just getting thrown around.
Wearing a harness secured to a lifeline, O'Donnell is lowered toward the lifeboat. It's rising and falling in surging 12-meter waves.
I actually got in the water at one point, swimming towards it, thinking he's just going to pay the cable out so I can get to it. And the next minute, I'm swimming in absolute midair.
Inside the lifeboat, the crew can only wait and hope.
We weren't in there just for 5 minutes. That was approximately 3 hours we were in that lifeboat for, and it seemed like weeks.
But Jay O'Donnell is nearly there. Balancing carefully on the outside, he opens the door and greets what he thinks will be a French-speaking crew.
Bonjour! Ça va?
I think maybe he was told it was a French vessel.
It was horrible in there. They were seasick, and they were desperate to get out of that situation. And you know, you could see the fear in their eyes. They, you know, I don't think they thought they were being rescued.
Anybody hurt?
Quite quickly, he understood we were actually English speaking, all of us. And he reassured us. He says, we're going to get you all off safely.
O'Donnell's next task is to get everyone up to safety as fast as he can. The chopper has limited fuel,
Okay, you!
so time is of the essence.
I'm gonna hook you up to the harness!
I tried to give them some sort of a safety brief, And I said, this is what you need to do. Arms down by side, on your knees, put the rescue strap on them, and then give them a big nod to say, you're ready to go.
Okay, up!
There was literally enough space for me to kneel and a tiny other square to get one person off at a time.
Ready?
One by one, he helps the survivors out of the storm-tossed lifeboat and onto the cable that will winch them to safety. Then he returns for the next survivor.
Okay, come on, next one, let's go!
It was kind of key to make it quick and safe.
Up to the strap, come on!
I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. But yet, there was so much relief. I'm safe now.
Okay, come on!
I'm going to be going into that helicopter and I'm okay. And it was just a phenomenal experience.
Okay, next one, let's go!
After 90 tense minutes, Jay O'Donnell manages to hoist the final survivor to safety.
Oh, God. That feeling, it's like, really exhilarated feeling. We did it.
The rescue mission to get us out of that catastrophic situation, that's an amazing job. I can't believe someone would risk their life for others like that.
The entire crew is safely ashore. But the Napoli is stranded near the western end of the English Channel, taking on water through the crack in its hull. Salvage experts warn authorities the Napoli could be a ticking environmental time bomb.
She was carrying 4,000 cubic meters of heavy fuel oil. That's a substance like tar. Don't think of it as oil. It really is horrible.
At the time, Robin Middleton was the UK SOS rep, the Secretary of State's representative for maritime salvage and intervention. His task: safeguard life and the environment for the British government.
When the Napoli incident occurred, I was due to retire. So you can imagine it took me a little by surprise.
Middleton knows what's at risk. Just 5 years before, an oil tanker sank and spilled its contents, with catastrophic results.
We'd had the Prestige, which had spilled oil all over the beaches of Spain. Napoli would have put oil all over the beaches of the United Kingdom.
To avoid a similar disaster, the team wants to tow the crippled Napoli to a sheltered area where they can start to unload the hazardous contents. But there's a danger. The cracked ship might not be strong enough to survive being towed through the rough channel waters.
All right, let's get the structure guys in and have a look.
An international team of salvage experts is asked to weigh in.
With not much more to go on than just a photograph of what looked like the crack down the side of the hull.
Naval architect Chris Earle was a consultant on the case.
We had to sort of make a bit of a judgment call to work out whether it was safe to try and tow it or not.
If the ship sinks in deep water, it could make cleanup even harder.
Thanks for your help.
So risking the tow seems like the best option. The question now is, where?
We had to take it somewhere where it could be sheltered, somewhere close to shore or a port or a harbor.
He needs to watch out for powerful currents, and making for the British coast looks safer than heading to France. He zeroes in on several possible destinations along the UK side of the channel.
Dragging a broad on to the sea and the wind and the weather would almost certainly cause it to break up.
It's a difficult decision he's got to make, and he hasn't got the luxury of time to try and make that call.
It's got to be Portland. Show me the route to Portland.
Middleton has fixed on Portland, a former naval station on Britain's south coast that's sheltered from the open sea. As the tow gets underway, a different branch of the government is already trying to work out what caused the disaster. Tony Brown was a principal inspector with Britain's Marine Accident Investigation Branch.
At the time, it was still an ongoing abandonment, and what we didn't know was what sort of failure it was. So those initial stages was all very much a case of trying to get as much evidence together as we can.
Something tore the Napoli apart. The question is, what was it?
Thank you for coming. Please take a seat.
Happy to help.
With the Napoli still being towed to shore, investigators turn to their best available source of information.
What do you want to know?
The crew who survived the disaster.
I want you to tell us what happened.
Well, we had an engine room flooding alarm.
Memory fades, so when it comes to eyewitnesses, it is better to get there sooner rather than later.
Damn it! We've got flooding in the engine room. Get down there and take a look at what's going on.
The pipe separated like this.
All right.
The third engineer had a front row seat to the catastrophe, and he adds a curious detail about the flooding.
And there was this wall of oily water.
The water was thick with oil.
This wall of water that the engineer described, that was really important for us at that stage. That gave us a really good picture of what had happened.
Look at this. We have cracking here.
And oily water means we have a failure under the engine room.
It's a critical lead. It tells them the hull failed at what should be the strongest part of the ship's skeleton. The ship's keel runs along the entire centerline of the bottom and helps support the structure of the vessel. A failure here is almost unheard of.
It's a very rare occurrence. Container ships very, very rarely have any sort of structural failure of that magnitude.
A failure like this means whatever went wrong must have involved unusually powerful forces. Investigators wonder if the storm was extreme enough to explain it. The Napoli was sailing in Category 11 winds, a violent storm just one step short of a hurricane.
The wave height was up to 9 meters, so it was a pretty rough seas. They're not ones that would have been comfortable by any means.
But it's not the weather on its own that catches the investigators' attention.
I nearly fell over in the shower.
Wow.
It was like I was inside of a washing machine.
The account of one of the officers having difficulty standing up in the shower and the failure being preceded by several quite strong strikes of waves kind of gave us cause for concern. When a ship's heading into large waves, it can experience a phenomenon called slamming.
Slamming happens when the bow drops into oncoming waves, and the powerful impacts reverberate through the hull.
That sends a judder all the way through the ship, so you can really feel it.
The juddering vibrations can cause major stress to the hull. But the captain was an experienced seaman.
Chief.
Engine room.
This is the captain.
Reduce engine speed now to 71 RPM.
Got it, Captain.
He adjusted his speed and never felt any sign the ship was in danger.
If you take the analogy of speed bumps in the road, you drive over speed bumps at 40 miles an hour, you're going to damage your car. So the master had slowed down.
The slamming is one more sign the ship was enduring a rough voyage. But there's no indication it was enough to tear the ship apart.
Although the vessel was pounding, but the bow was pounding into the waves, and although there would have been vibration felt in this situation, may have seemed relatively safe. That was just a bit of a dead end for us.
It's starting to look like the only way to find out what tore the Napoli apart is to get a look at the hull.
I'd really love to get a look at that ship.
But the Napoli's 48-hour, 300-kilometer journey to Portland has hit a roadblock with 60 kilometers left to the finish line.
At 26 minutes past 7, a call from the salvage master to say, the cracks are opening, she's taken on the water, she's sinking.
The Napoli is sinking fast, and with an environmental catastrophe looming, the mystery of why it broke up may have to wait.
Napoli's in trouble.
Robin Middleton is back in the hot seat. He's just received word the Napoli is too damaged to reach its emergency beaching site at Portland. If it sinks, it could release a massive oil spill far offshore, where it's difficult to contain. He's got to get the ship to shore.
It's got to be Branscombe.
And that means finding somewhere to run it aground.
Once an accident happens, the clock can never be wound back. That just doesn't happen. So I'd planned out for what the worst case could be.
Middleton is forced to make a difficult choice. Branscombe Beach in Lime Bay. It's close by, but it's also a United Nations Environmental Heritage Site. Hardly the ideal location to ground a ship filled with oil. On January 20th, 2007, 3 days after the Napoli's crew abandoned ship, it successfully beached less than a mile from shore.
It was a tough decision because I had effectively put this thing ashore in one of the most environmentally protected and vulnerable areas of the United Kingdom.
Lime Bay resident and Coast Guard volunteer Roger Hoare is sent to get eyes on the unfolding situation.
Never before in my time had I ever seen anything so big, so close to the coast in this position. Quite bizarre, surreal.
Any spilled oil will float to the surface, so crews quickly surround the wreck with more than half a mile of containment booms to keep it from reaching shore or escaping into the channel.
If it's not protected properly, when an incident like the Napoli comes along, it can tip it over the edge from being a disaster to a real ecological catastrophe.
Now, leaking oil could actually be removed from the sea, literally pumped into containers and recovered in that way. And they were very effective at it too in the end.
Robin Middleton's plan to prevent a catastrophic oil spill has succeeded. But just as one crisis is brought under control, another one is looming. The beached vessel begins listing in the rough seas, throwing more than 100 containers overboard. Some sink, but others drift off in one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world.
They were either just above the surface of the sea or just below.
At the time, Mark Rodaway was in charge of the nearby Coast Guard station.
And now these 40-foot steel containers full of water and goods were a real hazard to shipping. And one of our primary objectives was to start predicting how they would float or where they would drift to, and then start putting warnings out to other shipping going up and down the English Channel.
Nearly 60 containers wash ashore on Branscombe, attracting hundreds of scavengers. The story quickly becomes a media sensation.
It took us by complete surprise that so many people could get here so quickly.
People from far and wide started to head to those beaches, and it really was a whiskey galore, come on down and look what's on the beach.
They break into the containers to grab whatever they can and carry it up the cliffs.
There was people walking off the beach with BMW steering wheels. There was a lot of empty wine barrels that were on board. And I believe if you rolled a barrel into a field, you could get £10 a barrel, I believe.
There was a consignment of nappies that had broken open. Now, my understanding of nappies are that they absorb water, and these ones had been in the English Channel. So quite what the attraction was, I'm not sure.
There was motorbikes as well. I think there were 6 with keys, ignition keys in them, so they soon disappeared.
Under UK salvage law, scavengers have to return found items to the rightful owners if a claim is made. But enforcing it is a tall order.
We were deployed on the beaches to hand out receiver of wreck forms that people had to sign, fill in and post back to the powers that be. But I remember handing one to a certain gentleman who tore it off in front of me. It's fine, sir, carry on.
Robin Middleton's strategy has limited the environmental damage, but resulted in some very public chaos.
Everybody, I think, in the operation felt that I would be relieved or removed for doing this.
Yeah, I mean, this was a really big news story. It's not very often you have a large vessel in coastal waters around the UK. It was riveting viewing for everybody.
Thanks to the looting, there is now a public spotlight on the investigation into the Napoli disaster.
It's a serious accident and people want to find out what's being done about it. So we had to get something moving fairly quickly. We needed results.
With the Napoli beached on the south coast of England, French and Dutch salvage operators are finally able to secure the ship, and investigators are allowed to carefully make their way through the wreck.
We were itching to get on board so we can actually get the evidence we need from the vessel.
Oh, watch your step. Watch your step.
But we have to liaise with the salvors to negotiate when it's safe for accident investigators to actually go on board a vessel that is at risk.
Some of the oil had leaked from some of the tanks or some of the machinery, so there was a coating of oil all over. She was lying at a funny angle, so everything was perilously slippy. It was a very, very strange situation to be going into.
They're on the hunt for anything that might point them to the cause of the disaster.
Evidence collection is a priority.
They note the condition of the vessel and gather what they can.
Ah, there it is.
Including the loading computer.
We needed to investigate the cargo that was being carried at the time, the weight of the cargo, the distribution of the cargo.
This one's wrong.
The loading computer helps them compare the weight that was declared in the paperwork with the actual weight on board.
This one.
Distributed improperly, overweight containers can put a potentially devastating strain on the hull.
And you know something?
What they find is troubling. Of nearly 700 containers stored on deck, at least 20% were overweight by 3 tons or more, and more than 50 were in the wrong place.
If you don't know the weight of a container, it's very difficult to actually load a ship safely. There's not much margin for error here.
The investigators calculate the extra weight pushed the ship to nearly 99% of its maximum seagoing capacity.
Pretty close to that limit.
The hull didn't have much safety margin left, but something else must have tipped it over the edge.
What else was missing? What was that little something which just tipped her from being acceptable and happily sailing to just going past that point of failure?
Investigators scour Napoli's operational history and discover a possible explanation. This isn't its first major accident.
Yeah. She ran aground 6 years ago at full speed.
Full speed.
In April 2001, the MSC Napoli, then known as the Normandy, ran aground in the Straits of Malacca.
We were quite concerned as could there have been something in that accident that's affected the structural integrity of the ship.
But a closer look shows the theory doesn't hold up.
The damage previously from the grounding had been very much at the bow end of the vessel. There's no way it could have had any knock-on effects to the stern.
The investigation is at a standstill. A close-up look at the crack in the Napoli's hull might help. But an underwater survey is the closest they can get.
Diver, we have your signal. Please proceed.
If they can capture photographs of the damaged metal, it might tell them what went wrong.
We're all getting very impatient by this time. We're all desperate to try and find a little bit more information. So the hope was that by sending an ROV and divers down, we might be able to get a better view of the damage.
The challenges to an investigator really lie in being methodical, of being patient and looking at every bit of information and just not giving up.
Diver, move to your left, please.
But it's just one more disappointment.
Can't see a damn thing.
We spent all day desperately trying different ways to get some footage of the hull. But the silt and the sand and the debris around, visibility was absolutely dreadful.
This is pointless.
Indeed.
Just off the coast, the Napoli can't be repaired, and steps are taken to prepare the ship for its removal. Crews pump the water from its hull, and then blow it in half with a series of powerful explosions.
The thing to do was to actually separate the bow from the stern of the vessel.
With the ship now in pieces, it's easier to dispose of. The stern is scrapped at the beach, while the bow is towed to a shipyard in Belfast, where it too is dismantled.
She was recycled at a recycling facility at Harland and Wolff, right next to where the Titanic was built.
The ship is gone, but the mystery of what wrecked it remains. At a loss, the investigators are forced to consider a troubling possibility.
It's got to be something with the design.
If the ship had a design flaw, it might have remained hidden until the conditions were right to trigger it. They need to study every detail of how the hull was built.
We did obtain a copy of the design drawings, and we looked to see if the Napoli had any potential weaknesses.
Look, our crack is here. Right under the engine room.
Right.
Right where the framing changes.
The Napoli's hull was strengthened by a series of long beams. But under the engine room, they changed direction to better support the weight of the machinery. The exact point where the emergency began.
Damn it! We've got flooding in the engine room. Get down there and take a look at what's going on.
When we started really looking into the design, there was certainly an inherent weakness in the structure in the engine room.
Just made that one area potentially weaker than the rest of the ship.
The investigators think they're onto something. But the Napoli was a modern ship built under strict specifications.
Wave height, 9 meters.
How did a design flaw slip through the cracks?
Winds, 60 knots.
And how many other ships are at risk? Investigators looking into the loss of the Napoli are now focused on a potential weakness in the ship's design.
It's not an uncommon design, but the design of the Napoli, the engine room, was fairly far forward.
The design put the engine room and the change in framing closer to the middle of the ship, an area that's highly stressed at sea.
It became very apparent that the engine room structure would have been a very highly stressed part of the hull.
Did the Napoli have an Achilles heel that caused it to break open? It's an intriguing theory.
We're starting to get a bit of a picture as to what could have caused this structural failure. But we still had to go deeper.
To uncover the truth, They'll have to bring all of their evidence together and recreate the exact conditions the moment the ship broke open. They need to know if the design was strong enough to withstand the many stresses on the ship that day.
Chief, we're in big trouble. We got water in the engine room. Looks like the hull's opened up.
To test their theory, the investigators team up with experts from the DNV,
Waves, 9 meters.
the international organization that helps set standards for designing and building ships.
Winds, 60 knots.
They input all the incremental stresses the investigators discovered into a computer simulation program, from the storm to the overweight cargo to the force of the waves.
Run the simulation.
They need to know how the hull design will react. Cargo vessels are supposed to have a safety buffer between their design and the forces they're expected to encounter, including being overweight or in a storm. The results are conclusive. By a tiny margin, the combination of stressors the Napoli faced that day was just enough to rupture the hull.
At that point, the forces that are at bear are greater than the strength of the vessel. There may be a margin of safety from the design criteria, but anything that's beyond that can put it outside the limits. You've got the overweight containers, you've got the sea state. So you had all these things that combined together.
One stress in particular may have been the straw that broke the camel's back. The vibrations that shook the length of the hull as it slammed up and down in the waves.
As we found in the Napoli, is that put that on top of all the other stresses which were going on at the time could have been enough to just tip it over the edge.
The findings from the Marine Accident Investigation Branch spark a review of 1,500 container ships. 12 are found to be at risk of the same kind of failure as the Napoli and are slated for immediate repair.
I think this investigation was very significant in terms of saving lives in that it immediately put a spotlight on other similar vessels that existed and, of course, changed the design of future vessels.
Regulations are put in place to ensure all new ships will have sufficient hull strength.
Because of what we identified, the larger ships now are going through a far more stringent strength analysis at the design stage before they're being built.
A long-standing problem in the shipping industry is also addressed when loading computers are upgraded to help prevent ships from being overloaded.
Clearly the industry does its best to learn itself and to think things through, but it's not until an incident happens that you really start to see where the weak points are.
The new regulations will not only save ships,
Abandoned ship!
but lives as well. For the investigators on the MAIB team, it's a rewarding conclusion to a long and challenging investigation.
Experience has shown that no, you've got to keep patient, you've got to keep with it, chase down the other avenues, because there's always something turns up.
It's got to be Branscombe.
Robin Middleton faced a barrage of criticism for running the Napoli aground at Branscombe Beach. But he thinks his critics are missing the most important outcome from the emergency, one that vindicates him beyond a shadow of a doubt.
I believe that the decisions were proved correct. They did not look correct at the time to a lot of people. But the fact is that the Napoli did not turn out to be a major environmental disaster.
In my view, he was absolutely the right person in the right place at the right time. And Robin's gift was to be able to take a really desperate group of people and have them working towards a common goal.
Forbes Duthie has continued his career at sea, but the memory of the Napoli disaster is never far away.
Initially, when you stand on the dock and look up at it, you think, you can't lose a ship like that. They're just so strong. They're built to withstand anything. But then It's not always the case, and you've got to always be ready for the unexpected. I'm never going to forget it. It's going to make me stronger.